I was about to take my medication when my dog suddenly jumped and knocked the pill bottle to the floor. When I picked it up, I noticed that the label was peeling off. As soon as I saw the original label underneath, I began trembling in horror. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains of our farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, casting familiar shadows across the worn wooden table where I'd eaten breakfast for 43 years. I was 64 years old, and my hands had started that trembling thing they do before the first medication of the day. Nothing serious, the doctor said. Just age catching up with a lifetime of hard work on this land. My name is Maureen Barker, and I'd always prided myself on being sensible. Level-headed. The kind of woman who kept her composure when the tractor broke down mid-harvest, or when the bank called about late payments. But that Tuesday morning, everything I thought I knew about my quiet, predictable life shattered like dropped china. I reached for my pill bottle on the counter, the one with the white label that read, M. Barker, take one daily with food. Dr. Harrison had prescribed them 3 months ago for my blood pressure. Standard stuff for a woman my age. I'd just unscrewed the cap when Rusty, my golden retriever, bounded into the kitchen with his usual enthusiasm, tail wagging like he'd discovered buried treasure in the yard. Easy, boy, I said, but he was already jumping up, paws on my leg. The bottle flew from my hand, pills scattering across the linoleum like tiny white dice. I stood there for a moment, annoyed but not angry. Rusty couldn't help being Rusty. He was only 3, still puppy-hearted despite his size. Look what you've done, I sighed, kneeling down to gather the scattered medication. That's when I noticed it. The white label had peeled halfway off, revealing another label beneath. A different label. My heart gave a strange flutter as I picked up the bottle with shaking fingers that had nothing to do with my condition. I pulled the top label away completely. The original label read, R. Barker, take one daily. Warning, not for use with cardiac conditions. R. Barker, Robert Barker. My husband. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Robert had been in Mercy General Hospital for 6 weeks now, his heart condition deteriorating despite round-the-clock care. The doctors couldn't explain why a man who'd been stable for years had suddenly crashed. They'd tried different treatments, adjusted dosages, brought in specialists. Nothing worked. He just kept getting worse. And I'd been taking his medication for 3 months. My mind raced backward. 3 months ago, I'd started feeling off, dizzy spells, fatigue. Dr. Harrison had run tests and prescribed blood pressure medication, but I'd never actually seen Dr. Harrison about the prescription. The pills had been delivered to the house by our home health nurse, Denise Morgan, along with Robert's weekly medication supply. She'd explained that the doctor had called it in, saving me a trip to town. I'd trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She'd been caring for Robert for almost a year, ever since his first heart episode. She was professional, efficient, always on time, in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put us both at ease. But now, staring at that label, trust felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. I pulled myself up from the floor, my knees protesting, and walked to the hallway closet where we kept medical supplies. My hands were steady now, steadied by something harder than calcium and bone. Fear has a way of focusing the mind like nothing else. The closet was organized exactly how Denise had arranged it. She was meticulous about such things. Robert's medications were in a large plastic bin labeled with the days of the week. My medications, such as they were, sat in a smaller container beside them. I pulled out Robert's bin and checked the labels. All correct. All precisely what the hospital had prescribed. Then I checked my own container. 3 bottles, all with the peeling white labels. With trembling fingers, I peeled back the first one, Robert's blood thinner. The second revealed Robert's antiarrhythmic medication. The third was labeled for Robert's cholesterol medication. I'd been taking 3 of my husband's heart medications for 3 months while he lay in a hospital bed, deteriorating from lack of treatment. The room spun. I gripped the closet doorframe, forcing myself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. This wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally relabel 3 different medications. You don't accidentally swap an entire treatment regimen. This was deliberate. But why? What possible reason could Denise have for switching our medications? It made no sense. Unless, I thought about Robert's last few days before the hospital. He'd been agitated. Unusual for a man so calm he'd once talked down an angry bull with nothing but a quiet voice and steady hands. He'd been making phone calls, taking notes, asking questions about things I didn't fully understand. Something about the land, about water rights, about testing he'd had done on our well water. "They're lying, Maureen," he'd told me one night, 2 days before his collapse. "The numbers don't match. Someone's covering something up and it's making people sick." I'd attributed it to stress. Robert had always been protective of our community, our land, our neighbors. When the new manufacturing plant had opened 5 miles down the road 3 years ago, bringing jobs and prosperity to our dying town, he'd been cautiously optimistic. But lately, he'd grown suspicious of their waste management practices. "You're working yourself up over nothing," I'd said, patting his hand like you do when you want to soothe someone. "The EPA approved everything. The state inspectors come regularly." But Robert wasn't the type to work himself up over nothing. He was the type to quietly gather evidence until the truth became undeniable. 2 days after that conversation, he'd collapsed in the barn. "Heart attack," the paramedic said. "Rushed to Mercy General. Touch and go for weeks." And Denise had been here within hours, offering to coordinate his care, to manage his medications, to help me navigate the confusion of hospital protocols and insurance forms. I'd been so grateful, so relieved to have someone competent taking charge. How convenient for someone that Robert was now sedated and silent, unable to share whatever he'd discovered. How convenient that I'd been slowly poisoned by medications that would have made me confused, weak, unable to think clearly or ask the right questions. I walked back to the kitchen on legs that felt disconnected from my body. The morning sunshine seemed sinister now, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny conspirators in the air. Everything familiar had become strange. Everything safe had become suspect. The kitchen phone hung on the wall, avocado green from the 1970s, heavy as a brick. I lifted the receiver, then paused. Who would I call? The police? And tell them what? That my medication was mislabeled? They'd see an elderly woman, probably confused, possibly experiencing early dementia. They'd be polite but dismissive. They might even call my daughter Cassandra, who'd been suggesting for months that I was getting too old to manage the farm alone, that I should consider assisted living, that I should sign over power of attorney just to be safe. Cassandra, who'd married a lawyer named Derek Phillips 5 years ago. Derek, who'd been very interested in our property values, our mineral rights, our water access. Derek, who worked for a firm that represented industrial clients. Derek, who'd recommended Denise Morgan as our home health nurse. My stomach turned cold. I replaced the phone receiver without dialing. If I was right, if this was truly what it appeared to be, then I was in more danger than I'd ever imagined. And Robert, lying helpless in that hospital bed, was in even greater danger. The front door opened. I heard footsteps in the hallway, light and familiar. "Mrs. Barker? I'm here for the weekly medication check." Denise's voice, cheerful and professional, drifted from the entryway. She was early. She wasn't supposed to come until tomorrow. My heart hammered against my ribs. The pill bottles were still scattered on the floor. The labels were peeled back, exposing the truth. Evidence was everywhere. "Just a minute," I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. I had perhaps 30 seconds to decide. Confront her, hide the evidence, call for help, or pretend everything was normal. 30 seconds to choose between truth and safety. 30 seconds while a woman who'd been systematically poisoning me walked through my house, her footsteps growing closer. I looked down at Rusty, who'd settled on his bed in the corner, oblivious to the danger. Then I looked at the peeled labels, the scattered pills, the evidence of a conspiracy I was only beginning to understand. The footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen door. "Mrs. Barker, is everything all right?" I took a breath, made my choice, and stepped forward to face whatever came next. Because if I was going to save my husband's life, I first had to save my own. "Everything's fine, Denise," I said, sweeping the scattered pills into my apron pocket with one smooth motion as I stepped into the doorway, blocking her view of the kitchen. I dropped my vitamins. Clumsy of me. She stood in the hallway, her nurse's bag over one shoulder, wearing pale blue scrubs and that professional smile I'd once found so reassuring. Now I studied her face the way you study a stranger's, looking for cracks in the mask, for signs of guilt or malice. But Denise Morgan's expression remained perfectly pleasant, perfectly neutral. "You should be more careful, Mrs. Barker," she said, that gentle concern in her voice. "We don't want you falling. At your age, a broken hip could mean—" "I'm well aware what it could mean," I interrupted, surprised by the sharpness in my own tone. I softened it immediately. "I'm sorry. I didn't sleep well. Worried about Robert." Her face shifted to practiced sympathy. "Of course you are. Actually, that's why I came by early. I wanted to talk to you about his care plan." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression calm. "What about it? Could we sit down? Maybe I could make us some tea?" The thought of her in my kitchen, touching my things, preparing something I might drink, made my skin crawl. But I nodded, stepped aside, and followed her in, watching every move she made. She filled the kettle, her back to me, and I used those precious seconds to quickly sweep the remaining pills from the floor into the trash, burying them under a paper towel. The bottles with the peeled labels I slipped into my apron pocket alongside the pills, their weight pressing against my hip like a secret grenade. "I spoke with Dr. Spencer this morning," Denise said, pulling 2 mugs from the cabinet with the ease of someone who'd been in this house dozens of times. "Robert's condition isn't improving as they'd hoped." "I know. I was there yesterday." "Of course." She turned, leaning against the counter while the kettle heated. "Dr. Spencer thinks it might be time to consider long-term care options, a facility where Robert could receive more intensive treatment. He's already in a hospital receiving intensive treatment. I mean after. When he's stable enough to transfer but not well enough to come home." She pulled tea bags from the canister, dropped them into the mugs. "There's a wonderful cardiac care facility in Pittsburgh. Very specialized, very expensive, but Derek mentioned that with your property values you could—" "Derek mentioned?" I kept my voice level, curious. "You've been discussing my finances with my son-in-law?" A flicker of something crossed her face. Annoyance? Concern? It vanished too quickly to identify. "Only in the context of Robert's care. Derek's been very helpful in navigating the insurance complexities. He's worried about you, Mrs. Barker. They all are. They all are. Not Cassandra is. Not your family is. But they all are." Spoken with the presumption of insider knowledge, as if she were part of some collective that made decisions about my life. The kettle whistled. Denise poured water into both mugs, her movements precise and efficient. She slid one across the table to me. I didn't touch it. "I appreciate everyone's concern," I said carefully, "but I'm perfectly capable of making decisions about my husband's care." "Of course you are." She sat down across from me, wrapping her hands around her own mug. "No one's suggesting otherwise. But you have to admit, Maureen, may I call you Maureen? You've been under tremendous stress. You're not sleeping well, you said so yourself. And at your age, stress can affect judgment, memory, decision-making ability." There it was. The subtle undermining, dressed up as concern. At your age. As if 64 meant incompetent. As if my lifetime of managing a farm, raising children, navigating droughts and floods and financial crises counted for nothing because my hair had gone gray. "My judgment is fine," I said quietly. "I'm sure it is." She sipped her tea, watching me over the rim. "But Cassandra mentioned you've seemed confused lately, forgetting appointments, misplacing things. She's worried you might be experiencing early-stage cognitive decline." Rage flashed through me, white-hot and clarifying. Confused. Forgetting things. Of course I'd been confused. I'd been taking medications designed for a heart patient, medications that would have made anyone dizzy and disoriented. And the only appointments I'd forgotten were ones Cassandra claimed to have told me about but never had. Part of her ongoing campaign to paint me as incompetent. But I couldn't say any of that. Not yet. Not until I understood the full scope of what was happening and who was involved. Cassandra worries too much, I said instead. I'm fine. Denise set down her mug, her expression shifting to something more serious. Mrs. Barker, I need to be frank with you. There are concerns about your ability to live alone right now. Derek has suggested that for your own safety, you might consider staying with them for a while. Just until Robert's situation is more stable. Absolutely not. It's just a suggestion. I said no. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. This is my home. I've lived here for over 40 years. I'm not leaving it because my daughter thinks I'm senile and my son-in-law thinks I'm incompetent. Denise stood too, her professional mask slipping just slightly, revealing something harder underneath. I understand you're upset, but you need to think practically. Robert's medical bills are mounting. The farm isn't generating income. You're alone out here, and if something happened, if you fell, if you had a medical emergency, there'd be no one to help. I have Rusty, I said, aware of how ridiculous it sounded even as I said it. A dog isn't going to call 911. We stared at each other across my kitchen table, the tea growing cold between us, and I understood with perfect clarity that this woman was not here to help me. She was here to assess me, to report back to whoever was pulling her strings, to determine whether I was close to breaking or whether more pressure needed to be applied. I think you should go, I said quietly. Mrs. Barker, now, please. She studied me for a long moment, then picked up her bag with deliberate slowness. I'll need to document this conversation for Robert's care records. The fact that you're becoming hostile and uncooperative could be significant for his treatment decisions. Document whatever you want, I said, walking her to the door. But make sure you note that I asked you to leave and you're complying. That shows I'm perfectly capable of making clear decisions about who I want in my home. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. You're making a mistake. Derek's only trying to help. We all are. I'm sure that's what you tell yourself. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, that I'd pushed back. She opened her mouth as if to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she walked out to her car, a silver sedan parked in my driveway. I watched through the window as she sat there for a moment, not starting the engine, her phone pressed to her ear, making a call, reporting in. After 2 minutes, she started the car and drove away, gravel crunching under her tires. Only when she disappeared down the long driveway did I allow myself to shake. I pulled the pill bottles from my apron pocket and set them on the table, staring at the damning evidence. I needed proof. I needed documentation. I needed something more than mislabeled bottles that could be explained away as a simple mistake, as the confusion of an elderly woman who couldn't keep track of her own medications. I needed to know exactly what Robert had discovered before his collapse. His office was upstairs, a small room overlooking the south pasture where he'd kept his papers, his computer, his files. I hadn't been in there since his hospitalization. It had felt like trespassing, invading his private space. But privacy was a luxury I could no longer afford. The stairs seemed steeper than I remembered, or maybe I was just exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear. Robert's office door was closed. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room smelled like him, Old Spice and leather and the faint tang of tobacco from the pipe he'd smoked on the porch. His desk was tidy, the way he always kept it. Papers stacked in neat piles, pens in a cup, his reading glasses folded beside the keyboard. But something was wrong. The filing cabinet in the corner stood open, its drawers pulled out at odd angles. Papers were shoved back haphazardly, not at all like Robert's careful organization. Someone had been here. Someone had searched through his files. My heart hammering, I moved to his desk. His computer was password protected, but I knew the password, our wedding anniversary. I typed it in, and the screen came to life. His email was open. The most recent messages were from 3 months ago, right before his collapse. I scrolled through them quickly, my eyes catching on subject lines. Water test results, EPA violation, meeting with Attorney General. I opened the first one. It was from a private laboratory in Harrisburg. Attached were water quality reports for our well and for 3 neighboring properties. The numbers meant nothing to me, but the summary at the bottom was clear enough. Elevated levels of industrial contaminants, including trichloroethylene and benzene. Levels exceed EPA safe drinking water standards. The second email was Robert's draft to the state EPA. I'm writing to report suspected violations of the Clean Water Act by Meridian Manufacturing. Attached documentation shows contamination of groundwater affecting multiple properties. The email had never been sent. I opened his documents folder. It was empty. Completely empty. Someone had deleted everything. But Robert was smarter than that. He'd always kept backups. I checked his desk drawers, finding nothing unusual, then moved to the filing cabinet. The folders were disorganized, searched, but still there. I flipped through them quickly. Tax records, insurance policies, property deeds. My hand stopped on a folder labeled medical records. Inside were Robert's cardiac test results from 2 years ago. Clean, healthy, no signs of heart disease. His doctor had given him a perfect bill of health. So how had a healthy man suddenly developed critical heart failure? Unless it wasn't sudden at all. Unless someone had been poisoning him slowly, systematically, just as they'd been poisoning me. A sound from downstairs froze me in place. The front door opening, footsteps in the hallway. "Mom, are you here?" Cassandra's voice, sharp with irritation. I shoved the folder back into the cabinet and moved quickly to the office door, my mind racing. Why was she here? Had Denise called her immediately? How much did my own daughter know about what was being done to me? "I'm upstairs," I called down, keeping my voice steady. "I'll be right there." But as I started down the stairs, I saw that Cassandra wasn't alone. Derek stood beside her in the hallway, his lawyer's face professionally concerned. And behind them, a man I didn't recognize in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Mom, we need to talk," Cassandra said, and the look in her eyes was one I'd never seen before. Cold, determined, almost predatory. "Derek's brought someone from the county. It's about your competency hearing." The world tilted sideways. They weren't just undermining me. They were moving to have me declared legally incompetent. And I had perhaps minutes to stop them. "There's no hearing scheduled," I said, descending the stairs with more confidence than I felt. I would have received notice. Derek stepped forward, his smile the practiced kind that never reached his eyes. "Actually, Maureen, in cases of emergency mental health concerns, the county can conduct preliminary assessments without formal notice. This is Dr. Raymond Foster from Adult Protective Services." The man in the dark suit nodded, his expression carefully neutral. He was perhaps 50, with gray temples and the weary look of someone who'd seen too many family tragedies. "Mrs. Barker, I'm here because concerns have been raised about your welfare and your ability to safely manage your affairs." "Concerns raised by whom?" "By your daughter and your healthcare provider." He pulled a document from his briefcase. "I have a sworn statement from Nurse Denise Morgan detailing incidents of confusion, aggression, and potential self-neglect over the past several weeks." "That's absurd," I said, but even to my own ears, my voice sounded thin, defensive, exactly how they wanted me to sound. Cassandra moved closer, and I searched her face for some trace of the daughter I'd raised. The little girl who'd brought me dandelions, who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who'd asked my advice about everything from college choices to wedding dresses. But the woman standing in my hallway was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be," she said. "We're trying to help you. By having me declared incompetent? By taking control of my life? By making sure you're safe." Her voice rose, cracking slightly. "You're alone out here, taking the wrong medications, forgetting things, acting paranoid. Denise said you practically threw her out of the house today. I asked her to leave because—" I stopped myself. "Because she's been poisoning me. Because she's part of whatever conspiracy put your father in the hospital." But I had no proof they'd believe. Nothing that wouldn't sound like the paranoid delusions of an elderly woman losing her grip on reality. Dr. Foster was watching me carefully, making mental notes I could almost see being filed away. "Mrs. Barker, why don't we sit down and talk? I'd like to ask you a few questions. Assess your current state of mind." "My current state of mind is fine. I don't consent to any assessment. Mom, Cassandra said, her tone sharpening. You're not helping yourself. Derek placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive but felt controlling. Maureen, I understand you're upset, but you need to understand the legal reality. We have documented evidence of declining mental capacity. We have a healthcare professional's sworn testimony. If you refuse to cooperate with this assessment, it only strengthens the case for immediate intervention. What kind of intervention? He exchanged a glance with Dr. Foster. Temporary guardianship. Just until we can establish that you're capable of managing your own affairs. And who would this temporary guardian be? You? Cassandra would be appointed as your guardian, yes, with my assistance in managing the legal and financial aspects. There it was. The real endgame. Control of the farm, control of the property, control of whatever Robert had discovered that was worth killing for. Because that's what this was. Attempted murder dressed up as healthcare, conspiracy wrapped in concern. My mind raced through options. I could refuse, but they'd use that as evidence of incompetence. I could cooperate, but any answer I gave would be twisted to support their narrative. I could call my own lawyer, but I didn't have one. Robert had always handled legal matters, and the family attorney was someone Derek knew, someone who'd probably been in on this from the beginning. I was trapped, and they knew it. But then I saw it. Dr. Foster's briefcase, still open on the hall table. Among the papers visible inside was a letterhead I recognized. Meridian Manufacturing, clipped to what looked like financial records. I couldn't see the details, but the company name alone made my blood run cold. The county social worker was on the company payroll. The discovery hit me like ice water. This wasn't just family greed. This was corporate damage control, a coordinated effort to silence anyone who threatened to expose Meridian's contamination. They'd corrupted a nurse, bought off a county official, and manipulated my own daughter into becoming a weapon against me. I need to use the bathroom, I said abruptly. Cassandra frowned. Mom, unless your competency assessment includes monitoring my bodily functions, I'm going to the bathroom. You can wait here or you can leave. Those are your options. I didn't wait for a response. I walked to the small bathroom under the stairs, locked the door, and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I had minutes, maybe less, before they decided to force the issue. I couldn't call the police. They'd side with the county official. I couldn't call a lawyer. I didn't have time to find one I could trust. But I could call the one person who might still be on my side. My son, James. James lived in Seattle, worked in tech, and had minimal contact with the family. He and Cassandra had never gotten along, and after he'd skipped her wedding 5 years ago, the rift had become a chasm. But James was brilliant, skeptical, and had no financial interest in the farm. If anyone would believe me, it was him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. My heart sank. He never answered calls from unknown numbers, and I was calling from the house phone because I'd left my cell upstairs. Hello? Relief washed through me. James, it's your mother. A pause. Mom? Why are you calling from the landline? Is everything okay? No, nothing is okay. I need you to listen very carefully and do exactly what I tell you. Don't interrupt. Don't ask questions. Just listen. To his credit, James didn't argue. I heard the sound of a door closing, background noise disappearing. Your father didn't have a heart attack. He was poisoned. So was I. The nurse who's been caring for us has been switching our medications, and I think it's because Dad discovered that Meridian Manufacturing has been contaminating the groundwater. Cassandra and Derek are trying to have me declared incompetent right now. There's a county official in the house, but he's on Meridian's payroll. I found evidence in his briefcase. They're going to take control of the property and probably finish what they started with your father. Silence. Then, Mom, that sounds insane. I know, but I need you to do something for me right now, before they take my phone, before they lock me up or drug me into compliance. I need you to call the state EPA and report what Dad found. His emails are on his computer. Password is our anniversary. There are water test results showing contamination. And I need you to call the FBI. The FBI? This is conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, corruption of public officials. It's federal. The local authorities are compromised. My voice was rising, and I forced it back down to a whisper. Please, James. I know we haven't been close. I know you have no reason to trust that I'm not just a confused old woman, but I'm your mother, and I'm asking you to trust me one more time. Another long pause. What's Dad's computer password again? I told him. I'm booking a flight right now. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. If they try to force you, tell them you're invoking your right to legal counsel and you're requesting a formal hearing with a court-appointed attorney present. That'll buy at least 72 hours. They won't listen. They have to. It's the law. Even in emergency cases, you have the right to legal representation. Cite that. Be loud about it if you have to. A knock on the bathroom door. Derek's voice. Maureen, this is taking a while. Are you all right in there? James, I have to go. I'm on this, Mom. I'll call you in 20 minutes from a number you won't recognize. Answer it. And Mom? I believe you. The phone went dead just as the knocking became more insistent. I flushed the toilet, ran the water, and opened the door. Derek stood there with Dr. Foster, both wearing expressions of practiced patience. We're concerned you might be having a medical emergency, Derek said. I'm fine, but I've decided I won't participate in any assessment without legal counsel present. I'm invoking my right to legal representation and requesting a formal hearing. Dr. Foster's expression shifted slightly. Mrs. Barker, that's certainly your right, but then we're done here. I looked past them to Cassandra, who stood in the doorway looking uncertain for the first time. You need to leave, all of you. Mom, please? Get out of my house. Derek's jaw tightened. The professional veneer cracked, revealing something cold underneath. You're making a serious mistake. We're trying to protect you from yourself. No, you're trying to protect Meridian Manufacturing from the truth. I found the check register in Dr. Foster's briefcase. I know he's being paid by the same company my husband was investigating. So unless you want me to start making calls to the state attorney general, I suggest you leave before this becomes a criminal matter. The room went deadly silent. Dr. Foster's face drained of color. His hand moved instinctively toward his briefcase, then stopped as he realized the admission that gesture would make. Cassandra looked between me and Derek, confusion written across her features. What is she talking about? Cassandra asked. Derek? What company? What investigation? She's confused, Derek said quickly. She's manufacturing conspiracies out of nothing. This is exactly the kind of paranoid ideation we've been talking about. But I saw the fear in his eyes, and I knew I'd struck bone. Cassandra, look in his briefcase, I said. Look at the letterhead on those documents. Look at the payment records. Don't touch that, Derek snapped, grabbing the briefcase before Cassandra could move. Those are confidential legal documents. Confidential? Cassandra's voice was rising now. Derek, what is she talking about? What company? Your mother is having a psychotic episode. I'm standing right here, and I'm perfectly lucid. Your husband is being paid by Meridian Manufacturing, the same company your father was about to report to the EPA for poisoning our water, the same company that's been funding our nurse's salary, the same company that paid Dr. Foster to come here today and help you have me declared incompetent. Cassandra turned to Derek, and I saw the first crack in her certainty. Is that true? Of course not. Then show me the briefcase. Cassandra, you're being ridiculous. Show me the briefcase. Dr. Foster moved toward the door. I think I should go. This is clearly a family matter that needs to be resolved privately. You're not going anywhere, I said, blocking his path. Not until you explain why a county employee is accepting money from a private corporation. That's slander, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then sue me. But first, you'll have to explain those payments in court. He looked at Derek, a silent question in his eyes. Derek gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. Whatever their plan had been, it was falling apart. Cassandra, Derek said, his voice taking on a soothing quality. Your mother is clearly unwell. She's connecting dots that don't exist, seeing conspiracies where there are only coincidences. The stress of Robert's illness has pushed her over the edge. We need to get her help. But Cassandra was staring at the briefcase in his hands, and I could see her mind working. processing, questioning things she'd accepted without thought. "You told me she was forgetting things," Cassandra said slowly. "You told me Denise reported signs of dementia, but Mom seems perfectly clear right now. She's making specific accusations with specific details. Paranoid delusions can be very detailed." "Stop it." Cassandra's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. "Just stop. I want to see what's in that briefcase." "No." The single word hung in the air like a confession. Cassandra's face went pale. "Oh my God. It's true, isn't it? Some of it, at least. You've been lying to me. I've been protecting you. From what? From my own mother? From a situation you couldn't understand. From legal complexities that would have worried you unnecessarily." "Legal complexities?" Her voice was shaking now. "Derek, what have you done?" The sound of gravel crunching outside interrupted whatever he might have said. Through the window, I saw a silver sedan pulling into the driveway. Denise was back, and she wasn't alone. A man in a dark jacket got out of the passenger side. Someone I'd never seen before. Someone whose presence here sent my instincts screaming. "Looks like you called for reinforcements," I said to Derek. His expression confirmed it. This wasn't over. They were escalating, and I was running out of time to prove I wasn't crazy before they made sure I never got the chance. The man who stepped out of Denise's car was built like someone who'd spent time enforcing things rather than discussing them. Not particularly tall, but solid, with the kind of watchful stillness that suggested violence was always an option, just not the first one. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, a leather jacket, but moved with tactical precision as he surveyed the property. Denise walked slightly behind him, her earlier professional demeanor replaced with something harder, more confident. She'd dropped the pretense now that the situation had escalated beyond gentle manipulation. "Who is that?" Cassandra asked, her voice tight. Derek didn't answer. He was watching through the window, his expression unreadable. I moved to the door and locked it, then went to the side window and locked that too. "We need to call the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Derek laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "Maureen, the sheriff plays golf with Meridian's CEO. Who do you think is going to respond to that call? Then, the state police are already investigating your husband for fraud and embezzlement." He said it casually, like he was mentioning the weather. "Turns out Robert has been siphoning money from the farm accounts for months. There's documentation, bank records. He's been hiding assets, preparing to flee. The stress of the investigation is probably what triggered his heart attack." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's a lie." "Is it? Check your bank accounts, Maureen. Check the missing funds. It's all there." My hands went cold. I hadn't checked the accounts in weeks, maybe longer. Robert had always managed the finances and I'd trusted him completely. But if someone with access to legal documents, with connections to banks and county officials, wanted to manufacture evidence of fraud— "You did this," I whispered. "You planted false records." "I'm protecting my wife's inheritance from a man who was about to destroy it with baseless accusations against a major employer in this county. A man who was so deep in paranoid delusions that he was going to cost this community jobs, tax revenue, and economic stability. He was telling the truth about the contamination. Was he?" Derek's voice was calm, reasonable, the tone of someone who'd already won and was just explaining the rules. "Because from where I stand, Robert was a 70-year-old man having a mental health crisis, making wild claims about a company that's been nothing but beneficial to this area. And now his wife is showing the same paranoid tendencies. It's tragic, really, but not surprising. These things run in families." Cassandra was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. "Derek, stop it. Just stop. I don't know what's happening here, but this isn't what we talked about." "What did you talk about?" I asked, looking at my daughter. "What exactly did Derek tell you?" She swallowed hard. "He said you were having memory problems, that you'd gotten confused about your medications, that you'd accused him of stealing from you, that you'd become paranoid and aggressive. He said the kindest thing would be to get you help before you hurt yourself. And you believed him. You're my mother, but he's my husband. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought I was helping you." A knock on the door made us all turn. Denise's voice came through, professional again. "Mrs. Barker, we need to talk." Please open the door. I didn't move. Mrs. Barker, I have a court order here authorizing a mental health evaluation. If you don't open this door, we'll be forced to involve law enforcement. A court order? I looked at Derek. That's impossible. There hasn't been time. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. Emergency psychiatric hold. I filed it this morning, just in case you became a danger to yourself or others. Judge Morrison signed it an hour ago. Judge Morrison, who sits on Meridian's board of directors? Judge Morrison, who cares about the well-being of county residents. The pieces were clicking together now, the full scope of the conspiracy becoming clear. They'd built a cage around me from every direction. Medical records, financial records, legal documents, corrupt officials. Every institution I might have turned to for help had been compromised or undermined. They'd isolated me completely, or so they thought. But they didn't know about James. They didn't know I'd already made contact with someone outside their web of control. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it without hesitation, putting it on speaker. Mrs. Barker? An unfamiliar woman's voice. This is Special Agent Florence Cunningham with the FBI field office in Philadelphia. I just received a call from your son James, who forwarded us your husband's water test results and emails, alleging corporate fraud, public corruption, and attempted murder. Based on that evidence, I need you to tell me exactly what's happening at your location right now. The room went absolutely silent. Derek's face drained of color. Dr. Foster, who'd been edging toward the door, froze. Cassandra's eyes went wide. There are 5 people in my home, I said clearly. My daughter Cassandra, her husband Derek Phillips, who is an attorney, Dr. Raymond Foster from County Adult Protective Services, my home health nurse Denise Morgan, and an unidentified man who just arrived with the nurse. Derek has shown me what he claims is an emergency psychiatric hold, but I believe these documents are part of a coordinated effort to silence me and my husband regarding water contamination by Meridian Manufacturing. Mrs. Barker, I need you to stay on this line. Do not hang up. I'm dispatching agents to your location now. What's your address? I gave it to her, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Don't open your door to anyone until our agents arrive. That's a direct order. Do you understand? Yes. Derek moved fast, lunging for the phone. I stepped back, but Cassandra surprised us both by intercepting him, her hand on his chest. Don't, she said quietly. Cassandra, she's manipulating you. This is part of her delusion. Is it? Her voice was cold now, because that sounded like a real FBI agent to me. And the way you just tried to grab that phone, the look on your face right now, that's not the face of someone who's innocent. Through the phone, Agent Cunningham's voice. Who just tried to take the phone? My son-in-law, Derek Phillips, I said. He's an attorney with Brennan, Walsh & Associates, the firm that represents Meridian Manufacturing in environmental litigation. Yes. A pause. Mrs. Barker, agents are 15 minutes away. Keep this line open. If anyone tries to force entry into your home, I want you to tell me immediately. The knock came again, harder this time. Denise's voice had lost its professional veneer entirely. Mrs. Barker, you need to open this door right now. You're under court order for psychiatric evaluation. Mrs. Barker? Agent Cunningham asked. Someone's trying to force me to open the door. They're claiming a court order for psychiatric evaluation. Do not open that door. I repeat, do not open it. If they force entry, that's felony home invasion, and I want you to state clearly that you're under FBI protection. Derek's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression shifted from angry to something closer to fear. He answered it, listened for a moment, then said, "We have a problem." He walked into the kitchen, his voice dropping to a murmur I couldn't quite hear. But I caught fragments. Didn't know about the sun, and FBI involvement changes everything, and need to contain this now. Dr. Foster had his own phone out, typing rapidly, probably alerting his handlers at Meridian that their careful conspiracy was unraveling. Cassandra stood in the middle of the chaos, looking lost. Mom, I don't understand. Why would Derek do this? What does any of this have to do with Dad's company investigating? Not investigating, I said gently. Your father discovered that Meridian has been dumping industrial waste that's contaminating our groundwater. He had evidence. He was about to report them to the EPA and probably the Attorney General. People in this county could get sick, could die. But Meridian stands to lose millions, maybe their entire operation. So they, what, tried to kill him? They poisoned him. And me. They switched our medications, and when that didn't work fast enough, they moved to have me declared incompetent so they could control the property, destroy the evidence, and make sure Robert could never testify even if he recovered. But Derek wouldn't. She stopped, looking at her husband who was still on the phone in the kitchen, his voice urgent and angry. He wouldn't do something like that. He's a lawyer. He helps people. He helps corporations avoid liability for their crimes, I said. And somewhere along the way, he decided that included making sure your father couldn't expose his biggest client. Derek came back into the room, his face composed now, back in lawyer mode. Maureen, I'm going to give you one chance to fix this situation. Call the FBI back. Tell them you were confused, that you had a panic attack, that you're sorry for wasting their time. Do that, and we can make all of this go away. The fraud charges against Robert disappear. The competency hearing gets postponed. You get to stay in your home. And if I don't, then you'll be declared incompetent by the end of the week. Robert will be indicted for embezzlement and fraud. You'll both lose everything. The farm, your savings, your reputation. And without your testimony, without Robert's testimony, Meridian continues operating exactly as they have been. Nothing changes except you lose everything you've spent your life building. It was the threat I'd been waiting for, the ultimatum laid bare. Comply or be destroyed. Through the phone, Agent Cunningham's voice. Mrs. Barker, are you being threatened? Yes, I said clearly. Derek Phillips just threatened me with false charges and financial ruin if I don't recant my statement to you. Derek Phillips, this is Special Agent Florence Cunningham with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm recording this conversation. You've just committed felony witness intimidation. I strongly suggest you remain exactly where you are and say nothing else until our agents arrive. Derek's face went white, then red. You're making a mistake. All of you. Meridian employs 300 people in this county. 300 families depend on that company. What happens to them when you shut it down over some old man's paranoid conspiracy theory? What happens to those 300 families when their children get cancer from drinking contaminated water? I asked quietly. What happens when the truth comes out eventually? And it always does. And they realize people knew. People covered it up. People chose profit over lives. He had no answer for that. The sound of vehicles on gravel made us all turn toward the window. But it wasn't the FBI. Not yet. It was 2 sheriff's department cruisers, lights flashing. You called the sheriff, I said to Derek. I called allies. He moved toward the door. Now you've got a choice, Maureen. You can let the sheriff in to execute that court order, or you can refuse and add resisting arrest to your list of problems. Agent Cunningham's voice was urgent. Mrs. Barker, do not let anyone in. Our agents are 7 minutes away. The sheriff's department doesn't have jurisdiction over a federal investigation. But the sheriff did have the authority to break down my door. And Derek knew it. Through the window, I watched Sheriff Tom Brennan get out of his vehicle, a man I'd known for 20 years, whose daughter had played with Cassandra in elementary school. He approached the porch with his hand on his duty weapon, his face set in official lines. Denise and her companion moved aside, letting him pass. Mrs. Barker, the sheriff called through the door. I've got a court order here requiring your immediate psychiatric evaluation. I don't want this to get ugly. Please open the door. Sheriff Brennan, I called back. I'm currently under FBI protection regarding a federal investigation. Special Agent Florence Cunningham is on the phone right now. FBI agents are en route to this location. A pause. Ma'am, I don't know anything about FBI involvement. What I know is I've got a valid court order signed by a county judge. Now please open this door. Sheriff? Agent Cunningham said, her voice carrying through the phone's speaker. This is Special Agent Florence Cunningham, badge number 7243. I'm asking you to stand down. Federal agents are 4 minutes out, and this location is now part of an active federal investigation. If you breach that residence before we arrive, it could be treated as interference with a federal case. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the sheriff's voice, uncertain now. I need to see credentials. You'll see them when my agents arrive. Until then, you need to step back from that door and wait. I watched through the window as the sheriff pulled out his own phone, probably calling someone higher up the chain. Someone who could tell him what to do when county orders collided with federal authority. Derek stood motionless, his lawyer's brain clearly calculating odds, consequences, exit strategies. Dr. Foster had his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. Cassandra just stared at all of them, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered to me. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't, sweetheart. But I should have. I should have questioned it. Should have trusted you instead of—" She looked at Derek with something like hatred now. Instead of him. The sound of more vehicles. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Through the window, I saw 2 black SUVs pull into the driveway, flanking the sheriff's cruisers. Agents and FBI windbreakers emerged, hands on weapons, moving with coordinated precision. "Agents on scene," I told Agent Cunningham. "I see them," she said. "Mrs. Barker, you can open your door now. You're safe." But even as I moved toward the door, even as I watched federal agents take control of the scene outside, I knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Because Derek was right about one thing. Meridian employed 300 people. They had lawyers, politicians, money, and influence. They wouldn't go down without a fight. And somewhere in a hospital bed, my husband lay unconscious, unable to defend himself, still at the mercy of a medical system that had already proven it could be compromised. I opened the door to federal agents and the promise of justice, but I also opened it to a war I wasn't sure I could win. The lead FBI agent was a woman in her 40s named Sarah Martinez, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a voice that cut through chaos like a scalpel through skin. She took one look at the scene, me standing in the doorway, Derek and Dr. Foster near the window, Cassandra crying, the sheriff looking uncertain, Denise and her companion on the porch, and made immediate decisions. "Derek Phillips?" she asked, though it was clear she already knew. Derek straightened, shifting into his professional persona. "I'm an attorney. I'm advising everyone here not to speak without legal counsel present. You can advise yourself all you want," Agent Martinez said. "Dr. Raymond Foster, you're being detained for questioning regarding public corruption and conspiracy. Denise Morgan, same. The gentleman on the porch whose name I don't know yet. Don't move." The man Denise had brought raised his hands slowly, his face carefully blank. "Mrs. Barker, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," I said. "But my husband is in Mercy General Hospital. He's been poisoned, and I believe he's still in danger. The people who did this to him have access to his medical care." Agent Martinez spoke into her radio. "I need agents at Mercy General immediately. Patient Robert Barker, cardiac unit. No one administers any medication or treatment until we verify credentials and secure the room." She turned back to me. "I'm going to need you to tell me everything, Mrs. Barker. But first, is there somewhere we can sit down? Somewhere secure?" "The dining room," I said. "It has one door and windows I can watch." We moved inside, agents securing the perimeter, taking Derek's phone, Dr. Foster's briefcase, Denise's bag. The sheriff was arguing with another agent about jurisdiction, his voice rising in frustration. Through it all, I felt strangely calm. The panic and fear that had gripped me for hours had crystallized into something harder, clearer. I'd been preparing for this moment longer than they realized. Cassandra sat beside me at the dining table, her hand finding mine. Agent Martinez sat across from us, a recording device between us, her partner Agent Dean. I noticed the name tag and felt a flash of irony, standing by the door. "Before we begin," I said, "I need to show you something." I stood and walked to the antique hutch in the corner, the one that had belonged to Robert's grandmother. My fingers found the hidden latch Robert had shown me years ago when we'd first moved into this house. A small compartment opened, revealing a metal box I'd placed there 2 days ago. Mrs. Barker? Agent Martinez asked. I wasn't completely unprepared, I said, returning to the table with the box. I may be 64, but I've lived through droughts, floods, market crashes, and 43 years of farming. You learn to prepare for disasters. I opened the box. Inside were 3 items: a small recording device, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope. When Denise came to the house this morning, I said, I recorded our entire conversation, including the parts where she mentioned Derek had been discussing my competency with her, where she suggested I move in with my daughter, where she tried to pressure me into signing documents. I pressed play on the recorder. Denise's voice filled the room. Derek has suggested that for your own safety, you might consider staying with them for a while. Agent Martinez leaned forward, listening intently. The USB drive, I continued, contains copies of my husband's emails, his research on the water contamination, the test results from the private laboratory, and his draft report to the EPA. I made these copies yesterday after I realized someone had deleted the files from his computer. How did you recover deleted files? Agent Martinez asked. I didn't. Robert kept backups on an external hard drive hidden in the barn. He was old-fashioned that way. Didn't trust the cloud. I found it when I was looking for his notes. Cassandra stared at me. Mom, how did you know to look? I didn't know for certain until this morning, but your father didn't have a heart attack out of nowhere. He was healthy, strong, careful about his health. When I found those mislabeled medications, I started thinking about timing. Robert's collapse came 2 days after he told me about the contamination. That seemed convenient. I opened the sealed envelope and pulled out a handwritten letter. This is a statement I wrote last night and had notarized this morning by Edna Phillips at the bank. No relation to Derek, before you ask. It details everything I observed about the medication switches, dates and times of Denise's visits, conversations with Derek about the property, and my suspicions about Robert's illness. I gave a copy to Edna with instructions to send it to the State Attorney General if I didn't contact her by end of business today. Agent Martinez smiled slightly. You've been busy. I've been terrified, I corrected. But terror focuses the mind, and I had time to think last night after Denise left. Time to realize that if I was right about the poisoning, then I was in immediate danger. So I took precautions. What other precautions? I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app. I photographed every medication bottle in this house, front and back, with today's newspaper visible to timestamp the images. I photographed the labels before and after peeling them away. I photographed Dr. Foster's briefcase when he set it down in the hallway. He didn't notice, but I got a clear shot of those payment records from Meridian. You took all these photos while he was standing right there? Agent Martinez asked, something like respect in her voice. I'm old. People assume old women are fiddling with their phones because we can't figure out how they work. They don't assume we're documenting evidence of conspiracy. Cassandra made a sound between a laugh and a sob. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have listened to you. You trusted your husband. That's not a crime. I squeezed her hand. You didn't know what he was involved in. But I need you to tell these agents everything Derek told you about me, about your father, about this property. Everything. She nodded, wiping her eyes. He started talking about Mom's competency about 6 months ago. Said she was getting forgetful, that she'd accused him of trying to steal from her, which I now realize was probably her questioning why he was so interested in the property value. He said Dad was acting paranoid, making wild accusations about the manufacturing plant. He made it sound like they were both losing their grip on reality. Did he ever mention Meridian Manufacturing specifically? Agent Martinez asked. Not by name, just the plant or major employers in the county. He said Dad's accusations could cost the community jobs, that we needed to protect Mom from making legal mistakes based on Dad's delusions. What about the medication management? Who arranged for Denise Morgan to be your parents' nurse? Derek did. He said she was the best in the area, that she'd worked with elderly patients before, that she could help coordinate Dad's care. Cassandra's voice hardened. He vouched for her completely. Agent Martinez made notes. Mrs. Barker, you said your husband was investigating water contamination. Do you know how he first became aware of the problem? The Hendersons' daughter, I said. Emily. She's 8 years old, and she was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia 6 months ago. Robert went to visit the family, and Emily's mother mentioned that 3 other children in the area had been diagnosed with similar cancers in the past 2 years. Robert thought that was statistically unusual for such a small community. So he started testing the water? He tested our well first, then asked the Hendersons and 2 other families if he could test theirs. When the results came back showing contamination, he started researching Meridian's waste disposal practices. That's when he found discrepancies between what they reported to the EPA and what was actually being discharged. How did he find those discrepancies? I smiled slightly. Robert might have been a farmer, but he had a degree in environmental science from Penn State. He knew how to read EPA reports, knew what questions to ask, and he knew people at the state level who could pull records. Agent Martinez sat back, reassessing. Your husband was building a case. He was building an airtight case. That's why they had to stop him. The door opened and another agent stepped in, speaking quietly to Agent Martinez. She listened, her expression darkening, then turned to me. Mrs. Barker, we've secured your husband's hospital room. The medical team is running tests now to determine what medications he's actually been receiving versus what's listed in his chart. She paused. Initial review suggests significant discrepancies. My hands started shaking. Will he? The doctors are optimistic. If we've caught it in time, if we can reverse the effects of whatever he's been given, his prognosis may improve significantly. The relief was so intense I felt dizzy. Cassandra wrapped her arms around me, both of us crying now. There's something else, Agent Martinez said. We've found evidence that Meridian Manufacturing has been systematically covering up contamination issues for at least 3 years. Your husband wasn't the first person to raise concerns. There were 2 others, a county health inspector and a local environmental activist. Both died within the last 18 months. The room went cold. Died how? The inspector had a fatal car accident. Single vehicle, no witnesses. The activist committed suicide, allegedly. Both deaths were ruled accidental or self-inflicted, but in light of what's happened to your husband, we're reopening those investigations. They've been killing people, Cassandra whispered. And Derek knew. He had to know. Agent Martinez stood. We're arresting Derek Phillips, Denise Morgan, Dr. Raymond Foster, and the individual who came with Ms. Morgan. His name is Kyle Brennan, private security contractor with ties to Meridian. We'll be seeking warrants for several Meridian executives and potentially others in the county government. What about me? I asked. That court order Derek showed me. Fraudulent. Judge Morrison issued it without proper review, based on falsified medical reports. He's being questioned right now, and I suspect he's going to be very cooperative once he understands the alternative. She looked at me with something close to admiration. Mrs. Barker, you did everything right. You documented evidence. You reached out for help. You protected yourself and your husband. A lot of people in your situation would have been overwhelmed. A lot of people in my situation haven't spent 43 years dealing with disasters, I said. You learn resilience on a farm. You learn that when one crop fails, you plant another. When the bank says no, you find another way. When people underestimate you because of your age, you use that to your advantage. Through the window, I watched as Derek was led to one of the FBI vehicles in handcuffs. He looked back at the house once, his face a mask of rage and defeat. Denise followed, then Dr. Foster, then the man named Brennan. Sheriff Tom Brennan, presumably Kyle's relative, stood by his cruiser looking like a man who'd just watched his world collapse. He'd probably be next. Cassandra stood beside me at the window. What happens now? Now? I turned to face her. Now we make sure every family in this county knows their water has been poisoned. We make sure Meridian pays for what they've done. We make sure those 300 employees Derek was so worried about get jobs that don't require them to poison their neighbors to keep their paychecks. And Dad? Your father is going to recover. And when he does, he's going to see his case handed over to people who can actually do something about it. Federal prosecutors, EPA investigators, maybe even Congress if this gets big enough. Agent Martinez was on her phone again, coordinating with other teams. When she finished, she turned back to me. Mrs. Barker, I have to ask, when did you first suspect this was bigger than just your medication being switched? I thought about it. When Derek mentioned those 300 jobs, that's when I knew this wasn't just about silencing my husband. This was about protecting a system where corporations can poison people and buy enough politicians, judges, and bureaucrats to get away with it. Where they can kill anyone who threatens their profits and make it look like accident or illness or suicide. You sound angry. I am angry. I'm furious. Because my husband almost died. Because children are getting cancer. Because people like Derek convince themselves they're just doing their jobs, just protecting their clients, just following orders. They tell themselves the ends justify the means until they can't see the evil right in front of them. I looked at my daughter, who was crying again. But I'm also grateful. Because Cassandra has seen the truth now. She knows what her husband was capable of. And she'll never make the mistake of trusting blindly again. Mom, Cassandra said, her voice breaking. I helped them. I told Derek things about you, about Dad. I gave him information he used against you. You were manipulated by someone you loved. That's different from knowingly participating in a conspiracy. You're a victim here too, sweetheart. Agent Martinez checked her watch. Mrs. Barker, we're going to need you to come to the field office tomorrow for a full formal statement. But for tonight, you should rest. We'll have agents posted outside your property for security. I'd like to go see my husband. Of course. We'll provide transport and security. He should be awake soon, and I'm sure he'll want to see you. As we prepared to leave, as federal agents continued their work securing evidence and processing the crime scene my home had become, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was gone. The uncertainty had vanished. What remained was clarity, purpose, and the bone-deep satisfaction of knowing I'd fought back and won. Not with violence, not with weapons or physical force, but with intelligence, preparation, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from living long enough to understand that underestimating someone is the first step toward defeat. They'd looked at a 64-year-old woman and seen weakness. I'd looked back and seen their blind spot, and I'd used it to destroy them. 3 months later, I stood in the hospital room watching Robert sleep. Real sleep this time. Not the sedated unconsciousness that had kept him prisoner for so long. His color had returned, not the gray pallor of a dying man, but the weathered tan of someone who'd spent a lifetime working outdoors. The monitors beside his bed showed steady, healthy rhythms. The doctors called it miraculous. I called it justice. He's responding well to the treatment, Dr. Sarah Kim said, checking his chart. She was the new physician assigned to Robert's care after the previous medical team had been suspended pending investigation. Young, thorough, and refreshingly honest about what had been done to my husband. Another week and we should be able to move him to rehabilitation. After that, home care with proper supervision. No nurses, I said firmly. She smiled slightly. I understand your hesitation, Mrs. Barker, but I can personally vouch for the agency we'll be using. They're out of Philadelphia, completely independent, and they've been thoroughly vetted by the FBI. The FBI. Those 3 letters had become a constant presence in my life over the past months. Interviews, depositions, evidence review, witness preparation. Agent Martinez had been right. This case had grown far beyond anything I'd imagined that morning when Rusty knocked over my pill bottle. Meridian Manufacturing was facing federal charges for environmental crimes, conspiracy, racketeering, and 3 counts of attempted murder. Robert, me, and now they'd added the county health inspector whose accident was looking less accidental by the day. The activist's suicide was still under investigation, but new evidence suggested she'd been receiving anonymous threats shortly before her death. Derek was in federal custody awaiting trial. No bail. He'd been deemed a flight risk after they'd discovered offshore accounts and a passport under a false name. His law firm had immediately distanced themselves, claiming they'd been deceived about the nature of his work for Meridian. Maybe they were telling the truth. Maybe they were just saving their own skins. Denise Morgan had turned state's evidence, confessing to the medication switches in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'd claimed Derek had told her it was necessary to protect Robert from himself, that the old man's paranoia was dangerous, that she was helping the family. I didn't believe her. But her testimony was sealing the case against Derek, Dr. Foster, and several Meridian executives, so I'd learned to accept pragmatic victories. Dr. Foster had already pleaded guilty to corruption charges. Judge Morrison had resigned and was under investigation. Sheriff Brennan had taken early retirement. Kyle Brennan, the security contractor, was facing assault and conspiracy charges. The whole corrupt system was crumbling, one arrest at a time. Robert's eyes fluttered open. It took him a moment to focus, to remember where he was. But when he saw me, his face softened into a smile I'd missed more than I'd realized. "Hey there," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Hey yourself." I took his hand, feeling the strength slowly returning to his grip. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got kicked by a mule and dragged through a ditch." He looked around the room, taking in the monitors, the flowers Cassandra had brought yesterday, the cards from neighbors. "How long have I been here?" "About 3 months, give or take a few days of not being sure if you'd wake up at all." His expression shifted to concern. "Maureen, I'm fine, better than fine. And before you ask, yes, I stopped taking those pills. Yes, the FBI got involved. Yes, everyone who tried to kill us is either in custody or cooperating with prosecutors. And yes, your environmental case is now being handled by the EPA, the Department of Justice, and 3 congressional committees." He blinked. "That's a lot to process. You've got time. The doctors say you need to focus on recovery, not on catching up with everything you missed. But I thought you'd want to know. The water contamination is public now. Meridian's been shut down pending remediation. The county is bringing in clean water for affected families. And Emily Henderson is responding to treatment. Her mother called last week to thank you." Tears welled in Robert's eyes. "I thought I'd failed. I thought they'd won. They almost did. But you taught me something over 43 years of marriage, Robert Barker. You taught me that good soil produces good crops if you're patient enough to let them grow. Sometimes justice is the same way. It takes time, but if you plant the right seeds, truth finds a way to surface." That's very poetic for someone who spent 3 months fighting federal conspiracies. Maybe fighting conspiracies makes you poetic. I squeezed his hand. Or maybe I just missed having someone to talk to who actually listens. Dr. Kim cleared her throat gently. "I'll give you 2 some privacy, but don't tire him out, Mrs. Barker. He still needs rest." After she left, Robert studied my face with the careful attention he usually reserved for weather patterns and soil quality. "You look different." "I'm 3 months older." "We all look different." "No, not that. You look stronger. Like you've been carrying something heavy and you've gotten used to the weight." I thought about that. He wasn't wrong. The past 3 months had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I'd testified before federal investigators. I'd faced down lawyers who tried to discredit me. I'd stood firm while people questioned my memory, my judgment, my sanity. And I'd won every single battle. "I learned something," I said quietly. "I learned that being underestimated is a gift if you're smart enough to use it." They looked at me and saw a confused old woman. They never saw the woman who'd managed a farm through recessions and droughts, who'd raised 2 children while balancing books and negotiating with banks, who'd survived everything life threw at her and kept standing. "I've always seen that woman," Robert said. "I know, but I'm not sure I did. Not fully. Not until I had to." He was quiet for a moment. "What about Cassandra?" "She's devastated, humiliated, angry at Derek, angry at herself, angry at the world. But she's facing it. She filed for divorce last week. She's moved back to the farm temporarily while she figures out her next steps." "How is that? Having her home again?" "Complicated. We're rebuilding trust. She's trying to understand how she missed the signs, how she let Derek manipulate her into betraying her own parents. I'm trying to forgive her for not questioning what she was told. It's a process." "And James?" I smiled. James flew out the day after I called him. He stayed for 2 weeks, made sure I had good lawyers, helped coordinate with the FBI, and generally acted like the son I always knew he was under all that Seattle tech bro attitude. He and Cassandra even had a civil conversation. First one in 5 years. Miracles do happen. Apparently so. He's coming back next month to help me plan what we're doing with the farm. Robert's expression grew concerned. Maureen, if this is too much, if you want to sell, to move somewhere easier, absolutely not. I said it firmly enough that he actually flinched. This land is ours. We've spent our lives building something here, and I'm not letting a corrupt corporation and a criminal son-in-law drive me off of it. Besides, we have work to do. Work? The contamination affected 17 properties in this county. 17 families who need help, who need someone to fight for them the way you fought for everyone. I've been talking to James about setting up a community water testing program, not a foundation. Don't worry. I learned that lesson from too many bad novels. Just a small organization that helps families get independent testing done and connects them with legal resources if they need it. That sounds expensive. The farm will support it, and James is providing seed funding. He said something about finally using his tech money for something that matters. I paused. I think he's been feeling guilty that he wasn't here, that he left all of this to Cassandra and Derek. This is his way of making amends. Robert smiled. You've been busy. I've been angry. Angry at what they did to you, to me, to this community. And I've learned that anger isn't always destructive. Sometimes it's fuel. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to change things. A knock on the door interrupted us. Cassandra stood in the doorway, hesitant, holding a paper bag that smelled like the diner in town. I brought lunch. I can come back if— Come in, Robert said, his voice warm despite the exhaustion I could hear creeping into it. I'd like to see my daughter. She approached slowly, her eyes red from crying, a state that seemed to be perpetual these days. Hi, Dad. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything. Stop, he said gently. Your mother told me what happened. You were deceived by someone you loved. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. I should have known. Should have questioned. Should have, could have, would have. He waved his hand dismissively. None of that matters now. What matters is what you do next, how you rebuild, how you learn from this and become stronger. She set the food down and wiped her eyes. I don't know how to do that. Start by forgiving yourself, I said. Then start by helping us fix what was broken. There are families in this county who are scared, who don't know if their water is safe, who don't know who to trust. You could help with that. You're good with people, good at organizing. We could use that. You want me to help? After what I did? You made mistakes. You trusted the wrong person. But you're my daughter. And underneath all the hurt and anger, I still see the girl who brought me dandelions and told me they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. That girl is still in there. She just needs to remember who she is. Cassandra broke down completely then, sobbing in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. I held her while Robert watched, his eyes wet, and I realized that this moment right here was what they'd tried to take from us. Not the land, not the money, not even our lives exactly. They'd tried to take our family, our trust in each other, our ability to love and forgive and rebuild, and they'd failed. Over the next hour, we ate diner food and talked about small things. Cassandra told Robert about the farm, about how the winter wheat was coming in, about Rusty's latest escapade chasing rabbits through the south pasture. Robert told us about the fragments of memory he had from the past months, dreams and half-conscious moments that he'd thought were hallucinations but were probably real. We didn't talk about the trial. We didn't talk about Derek's betrayal or Meridian's crimes or the long road to justice that still stretched ahead. Those things would be there tomorrow, next week, next year. Right now, we were just a family, bruised but healing, learning to trust again. When visiting hours ended, I kissed Robert goodbye and walked out with Cassandra into the cool April evening. The hospital parking lot was full of people coming and going, families visiting loved ones, doctors ending shifts, the constant flow of human drama and hope and grief that filled every hospital in America. Mom, Cassandra said as we reached the car, do you really forgive me? I looked at my daughter, seeing past the 37-year-old woman to the little girl she'd been, to the teenager who'd tested every boundary, to the young adult who'd made choices I didn't understand but supported anyway, because that's what parents do. I really do. I said. But more importantly, you need to forgive yourself. You need to understand that you're not defined by the worst thing that happened to you, or the biggest mistake you made. You're defined by how you respond, how you grow, how you use the pain to become someone better. She nodded, wiping her eyes again. I'm going to try. I promise I'm going to try. We drove home in comfortable silence, the Pennsylvania countryside rolling past in shades of green and gold. Spring was coming, bringing renewal and growth and the promise of good things ahead. The farm appeared in the distance, my home for 43 years. The place where I'd raised children and buried dreams and discovered strengths I never knew I had. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw the work that still needed to be done. Fences to mend, fields to plant, a life to rebuild. But I also saw possibility. I saw a place where justice had prevailed, where truth had won, where an elderly woman had faced down corruption and emerged victorious not through violence or force, but through wisdom, patience, and the kind of intelligence that comes from living long enough to understand how the world really works. They'd underestimated me because of my age. They'd assumed gray hair meant diminished capacity. They'd looked at 64 years and seen weakness. But I'd looked at those same 64 years and seen experience, resilience, and the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime spent solving problems, surviving crises, and refusing to quit when things got hard. And that wisdom had saved my husband's life, exposed a criminal conspiracy, and reminded me of a truth I'd somehow forgotten in the comfortable routine of marriage and farming and growing old together. Age isn't weakness. It's earned strength. Every year, every challenge, every loss and triumph adds another layer of steel to your spine. Young people have energy and ambition and the reckless courage of those who haven't yet learned how much can go wrong. But old people like me, we have something more valuable. We have perspective. We know that disasters can be survived because we've survived them before. We know that patience often wins where aggression fails. We know how to read people, how to plan, how to wait for exactly the right moment to act. We know that the world belongs not to the loudest or the strongest, but to those who refuse to give up. Rusty bounded out to greet us as we got out of the car, his tail wagging with uncomplicated joy. I scratched his ears, grateful for the dog whose clumsy enthusiasm had started this whole journey. Good boy, I whispered. Very good boy. Inside, the house smelled like home. Old wood and coffee and the faint lingering scent of bread I'd baked that morning. Cassandra went to make tea while I walked through the familiar rooms, touching surfaces worn smooth by decades of use, looking at photos of happier times, remembering. This was my kingdom. Not large, not fancy, not impressive by any conventional measure. Just a farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, where an old woman had taken on a corporate conspiracy and won. Just a home where justice had prevailed. Just a place where the wisdom of age had proven stronger than the ruthless ambition of youth. And as the sun set over fields that would soon be green with new growth, I stood at my kitchen window and smiled, knowing that some lessons can only be learned through living, and some victories can only be won by those who've survived long enough to understand that true strength isn't about force. It's about knowing when to act, how to fight, and why some battles are worth everything you have to give. I'd learned those lessons over 64 years, and when it mattered most, those lessons had saved us all. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.